Hannah Weston was a young bride of 17. She and her husband, Josiah, had been married in Machias the previous December, and it was to their home that a messenger came one June morning in 1775 from Machias, telling them that the citizens in Machias were very upset because of the British armed vessel, the Margaretta, had come to Machias and was threatening the settlement. And the men there had decided that they would try to capture the captain of the Margaretta along with his crew, and they needed the assistance of the men from Chandler's River. Word spread around the settlement, and the men gathered and left early in the morning for Machias. It was suggested that they, on their travels to Machias through the woods, that they would mark the trees with an axe, so to leave a trail of the way they had gone. After the men had left, Hannah had watched to see what the men had taken with them, and she went around the settlement and realized that more ammunition could be needed in Machias, and she gathered up what remained. She and her younger sister-in-law, Rebecca, decided that they would take the journey to Machias because there was no other one left in the settlement that could, no men of young enough or sturdy enough to take the supplies to Machias. They headed off, and Hannah carried the close to 40 pounds of powder and pewter, knives, forks, cups, whatever. And Rebecca, who was a smaller person than Hannah, and she had took lunch or supplies for 2 days, and they headed off through the woods. They had an easy time until they almost got to Whitneyville, when suddenly they missed a turn, or they missed a sign on the tree, and they got lost, and they were just exhausted, and so they sat down for a while and had a lunch. They finally got up, found their way back, and they went into what is now Whitneyville. When they got to Whitneyville, they decided that they had reached the river, and the easiest way to go toward Machias, of course, was to follow the river. But because that they were afraid that they might meet some unsavory persons in the woods along the river, they decided to go a little bit further away from the river, but it led them through briar patches, up and down over hills, through brooks, and they had quite a terrible time. Their clothes became shredded, and as the time grew late, it was probably getting dark. Rebecca finally just was exhausted, and she just sat down on a log and said, "I can't go another step forward." And it was right at the bottom of a hill, and so Hannah said, "Stay here, I will come back for you." And she went up the top of the hill and looked, and there was houses, and so she ran back down, got Rebecca, and took her up the hill. They came up the hill, and they indeed became almost immediately surrounded by people who were wondering who these two girls were. And they stumbled into what is Gideon O'Brien's house and told them what they had tried to do. But what had and both were just exhausted, and they went in and they were fed, and they both went to sleep and slept until the next day. And it was then that they were told that the battle had already been fought. But for what they tried to do, they were proclaimed as heroines of the Machias Valley. And in appreciation, two of the merchants in Machias gave them each a piece of cloth to make a dress. They rested for 2 days and went home with the rest of the men from Chandler's River by boat this time, by ship this time. And that's basically the story of what they did. Hannah was a remarkable lady. In 1839, a deposition, she gave a deposition, and in her own words told of how she and Rebecca had come to Machias with the load, with the supplies of powder. And she ended the deposition by saying, have stood by many a good night. She lived to be 97 years old. When she died, she and Josiah had 13 children. After the battle, the girls were proclaimed as heroines of the Machias Valley. And in appreciation for what they tried to do, two of the merchants in Machias gave them each 6 yards of material to make a dress. And this is a piece of the material that they received. As you can see, it's very bright and colorful. It's camelet, which is very coarse, but it is a remnant of what was given to them. This is another item that belonged to Hannah Weston. Pockets were used by ladies in those days. They didn't have a pocket like in a dress or things, but underneath their skirt they would tie these pockets, and it's where they would carry things. And this is Hannah Weston's. I like to think that perhaps she used it to carry her knitting, because you can see here where the knitting needles might have gone through. But this is very old, suffice to say, and it was her pocket. And that's about it.